As the sun set over the quiet parking lot, Heather wrapped up her day at work, looking forward to getting home to her daughter. She waved goodbye to her co-workers and walked toward her car, not noticing a figure hidden in the shadows. Suddenly, a person in a mask stepped forward, dressed all in black and holding a gun. Before Heather could react, the stranger aimed the weapon at her and said, "You've ruined my life." Two gunshots shattered the silence, leaving her co-workers frozen with fear. The attacker quickly vanished into the night, but the shocking event was only the start. What followed was a chain of secrets and betrayals no one saw coming. During their time at the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio Garaus and Heather Hodges met at a party. Ignacio was a friendly and confident young man, immediately catching Heather's attention. It was love at first sight for both of them. Heather had a lively personality with a hint of innocence, complemented by her fair skin, red lips, and dark hair. Ignacio found her irresistible and soon reached out to her. When he invited her on a date, Heather felt like Cinderella after the ball, radiant with joy. She eagerly shared the news with her roommates, who celebrated her happiness. For her friends, this new romance was special. They saw it as the beginning of something extraordinary, as Ignacio had never had a serious girlfriend before. Their relationship quickly deepened. Ignacio was thoughtful, often surprising Heather with flowers or her favorite coffee. His kindness and attentiveness made her feel cherished, and their bond grew stronger. After they graduated from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio proposed to Heather, who happily accepted. However, she set a clear condition for their engagement. If Ignacio ever cheated, she would end the marriage immediately, with no second chances. This clause was a non-negotiable boundary for her. A year after their engagement, they married in a joyful ceremony. Ignacio began working as an officer for the Colorado Police Department, while Heather took a supervisory role at a local credit union. Her colleagues and clients deeply admired her for her exceptional ability to handle situations with empathy and grace. One co-worker described her as a wonderful person, a sentiment that seemed universal. After their wedding, Heather and Ignacio decided to start a family. The birth of their daughter, Victoria, brought immense joy to their lives, and Heather's world began to revolve around her new baby. Ignacio also showed himself to be a dedicated father. From the outside, their life in 1997 looked perfect. But tragedy struck when Heather's father passed away from a heart attack, and shortly after, her mother, battling cancer, also passed away. Grieving, Heather dedicated herself to her mother's care, providing constant support until her mother's passing in 2003. Throughout this difficult time, Ignacio proved to be a caring husband, taking on additional responsibilities with their daughter and around the home. After months of supporting Heather, however, Ignacio's attention began to drift toward a co-worker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the police department. Shauna, who was married to a Weld County deputy named Ken, had 2 children, though her marriage was on the rocks. Shauna later mentioned that her relationship with Ken changed after the birth of their second child. Initially, her interactions with Ignacio were friendly, but gradually they became more flirtatious, and a deeper connection began to form between them. The relationship between Ignacio and Shauna eventually became the talk of the town, yet Heather remained unaware of the situation. Everyone around them knew but felt uncomfortable sharing the truth with her. Over time, the relationship between Ignacio and Shauna deepened, evolving beyond mere friendship. Their bond intensified, and though they were both married, they struggled to resist their mutual attraction. Eventually, Shauna discovered she was pregnant and excitedly shared the news with Ignacio. However, he reacted with hesitation, questioning whether the child could be his, as Ken had undergone a vasectomy after their second child's birth. This revelation led Ignacio to pressure Shauna into terminating the pregnancy, fearing the repercussions if Heather found out. Years passed, and Heather remained oblivious to her husband's affair with Shauna. But as Shauna grew frustrated, she decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna and a close friend followed Heather into a grocery store, watching her every move. Unaware of their presence, Heather was chatting with a friend on the phone. Eventually, Shauna approached her, hurling accusations and insults, which left Heather shocked and furious. This confrontation deeply unsettled Heather, prompting her to question Ignacio when she recognized Shauna as his co-worker from the police department. Ignacio explained that Shauna had feelings for him, but assured Heather there was nothing to worry about. He promised to speak with Shauna and put an end to her harassment. However, even after this confrontation, Shauna continued to pursue Ignacio, adding strain to an already fragile situation. One evening, Shauna unexpectedly showed up at Ignacio and Heather's home, demanding to see Ignacio. This left Heather puzzled and uneasy. Although she didn't want to consider the idea of anything inappropriate between her husband and his co-worker, she couldn't shake her curiosity about what was really going on. In a moment of confidence, Shauna confided in someone from the county dispatch center, sharing details about her relationship with Ignacio. She admitted that her feelings for him were stronger than anything she'd ever felt for anyone else. However, Shauna also expressed her frustration over Ignacio's wife, Heather, which complicated things further. According to her supervisor, Shauna's behavior was impacting her work. She even mentioned going to the shooting range to vent her frustrations, imagining the targets as Heather. Shauna's husband, Ken, had been unaware of her affair with Ignacio until he found her diary, which documented her secret relationship. Despite feeling betrayed, Ken decided to stay with Shauna for the sake of their children. Shauna knew Ignacio's affair was risky, giving her a sense of control as she was determined to remain in his life as his only woman. She even threatened to expose everything to Heather if Ignacio ever tried to end things. Her fixation on him intensified, and in July 2005, she took a bold step to solidify her attachment by tattooing his last name on her leg. Her infatuation spiraled further, reaching the point of harassment, especially when she learned that Ignacio and Heather were taking their daughter, Victoria, out to a restaurant. Shauna ensured she and her family were there as well. Though Shauna's behavior worried him, Ignacio continued the affair. When Shauna found herself pregnant again, she insisted on keeping the baby, naming him Christian. In March 2006, she gave birth while still married to Ken. Heather had no idea about this child, a result of Ignacio's involvement with Shauna. Ken, despite his knowledge, offered to raise Christian as his own if Shauna stayed with him, and she agreed. In the summer of 2006, while Heather was away, a woman approached her with shocking news. Shauna had recently given birth to Ignacio's child. Stunned and disoriented, Heather confronted Ignacio upon returning home. When pressed, he lied again, trying to keep his affair hidden. Trusting her husband, Heather believed him. But one December night in 2006, Heather awoke to find Ignacio missing. When he finally returned, she immediately confronted him. This time, Ignacio didn't attempt to lie. Instead, he confessed everything: his years-long affair with Shauna, both pregnancies, and the birth of their son. True to her promise, Heather ended the relationship and asked Ignacio to leave. However, determined to keep her family intact for Victoria's sake, she reached out to Ignacio the next day, despite her initial disbelief. In their conversation, a heartbroken Heather made her feelings clear. She wanted to keep her marriage but wasn't ready to reconcile immediately. She laid out specific conditions for their future together. First, Ignacio had to take an STD test and agree to counseling to address the issues leading to his infidelity. Heather also insisted that Ignacio renounce his parental rights over Shauna's child and completely end his relationship with Shauna. Committed to saving his marriage, Ignacio agreed to every condition. Knowing he had deeply hurt Heather, he called Shauna to end the affair once and for all. While Ignacio was on the phone with Shauna, Heather listened in from nearby, hearing every word. Moments later, a message arrived on Heather's phone with a photo of Ignacio's son with the caption, "Flesh and Blood." Shauna's fury escalated as she realized Ignacio had chosen to stay with Heather. Feeling betrayed and abandoned, Shauna considered pursuing child support, seeking financial compensation for her son, Christian. In early 2007, Ignacio and Heather were focused on rebuilding their marriage after Ignacio's infidelities. Despite the obstacles, they were determined to work through the challenges and move forward. However, as Ignacio tried to cut ties with Shauna, her harassment of Heather intensified, prompting Ignacio and Heather to take extreme steps to protect their family and home. They began parking Heather's car in the garage, fearing Shauna might damage it if it were left outside. They also sought legal assistance, having a lawyer send Shauna a formal warning that demanded she stay away from Ignacio, Heather, and their daughter, Victoria. The letter clearly instructed Shauna to cease all forms of harassment and intimidation. Despite these warnings, Shauna ignored the consequences and continued to harass Heather through text messages, emails, and voicemails filled with offensive and hurtful words. On January 23, 2007, around 6 p.m., Heather was leaving work at the credit union, eager to spend the evening with her daughter. But her peaceful night was shattered as she left the building with her co-workers and headed toward the parking lot. In the dimly lit area, a masked figure dressed in black and wielding a gun suddenly appeared, focusing on Heather. While others tried to hide, the assailant pointed the gun at Heather's head, ordered her to kneel, and said, "You've ruined my life," before shooting her twice in the head. After the attack, the shooter ran to a nearby red truck and quickly fled the scene. The shocking incident left Heather's colleagues in horror. Witnesses in the parking lot dialed 911 moments after the shooting. Paramedics arrived quickly, but their efforts to save Heather were in vain. The gunshot wounds to her head were fatal, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. When officers arrived to secure the crime scene, they realized the victim was Ignacio's wife. They immediately contacted Ignacio, urging him to come to the hospital. Racing through the hospital halls to reach the trauma room, Ignacio was stopped by a doctor who broke the devastating news that it was too late. Heather had passed away. Ignacio was hit hard by the realization that he would now have to break the heartbreaking news to his 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. At the crime scene, Witnesses provided their accounts to the police. One described seeing the shooter appear suddenly and then quickly flee in a red truck. Another witness suggested the shooter might have been a woman, based on their movements. As the investigation continued, Shauna's name surfaced due to her history of harassing Heather. Knowing that Shauna drove a vehicle similar to the one witnesses had described, the police quickly compiled evidence linking her to the murder. A general radio alert was issued to locate Shauna and the red truck. Meanwhile, Shauna's husband, Ken, was on duty that night when he heard the alert regarding his wife and her vehicle. Following instructions, Ken soon located Shauna near their home. She claimed she had been running errands but aroused suspicion when Ken noticed she was barefoot despite the cold January weather in Colorado, wearing only socks, underwear, and pants. He called the police for assistance and Shauna was promptly taken into custody. During the investigation, authorities uncovered evidence connecting Shauna to Heather's murder. A pair of shoes with Shauna's DNA was found near the crime scene, and 2 bullet casings from a gun, the same type Ken used at work, were recovered from the scene. A Halloween mask was also found beneath the seat of Ken's red truck, similar to the one reportedly used in the crime. Investigators found a suspiciously empty bathtub at Shauna's home, raising questions about her intentions and whether she had planned to dispose of potential evidence after the murder. Shauna was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Though the shell casings matched the weapon type, the actual gun was never recovered. Ken had turned over his service weapon to his supervisor after Heather's murder, but the gun used in the shooting remained missing. Ken was also accused of evidence tampering and complicity. During his questioning, Shauna claimed she was merely running errands and had returned home to retrieve her forgotten wallet. She vehemently denied any involvement in Heather's murder, insisting she had no knowledge of the incident. Ignacio was questioned extensively following Heather's death, but was ultimately cleared of any suspicion by February 2008. Shauna's murder trial began, and she pleaded not guilty. The prosecution highlighted Shauna's fixation on Ignacio as a potential motive behind Heather's murder. As part of the state's case, they arranged a deal with Shauna's former best friend, who agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. She spoke of Shauna's deep-seated resentment toward Heather. Throughout the trial, Shauna defended herself fiercely, denying any fantasies about killing Heather and refuting all accusations. She argued that she was headed to a liquor store when the shooting occurred, and even claimed her best friend was obsessed with her and wanted to make her happy by removing Heather. However, her best friend denied these claims when called to the stand. The prosecution suggested that Shauna had worn her husband's clothes during the shooting to implicate him in the murder, asserting that by eliminating Heather, Shauna and Ignacio would be free to live happily ever after. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. Shauna was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Ken resigned from the police department after Shauna's conviction and filed for divorce. Following the guilty verdict, he relocated with his children, including Christian, the son Shauna had with Ignacio. After some time, Ken returned to Colorado, hoping his children would someday visit Shauna in prison, as he believed she was still a loving mother. All charges against Ken were eventually dropped. Tragically, in 2015, Victoria, only 17 years old, lost her life in a car accident when she lost control of her vehicle and struck a tree, marking another heartbreaking loss for the family. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.